Everyone, let's turn to Chad, where France is reshaping its military strategy in Africa, with Chad emerging as a key partner. And that's less than 2 years after ending a defense agreement that brought to a close 65 years of continuous French military presence. Following months of diplomatic engagement, Paris and N'Djamena have begun rebuilding security cooperation. The renewed partnership focuses on military training, intelligence sharing, medical evacuation, and limited air support, rather than permanent French bases or large troop deployment. The shift comes after France withdrew its forces from Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Chad, prompting a broader rethink of its role on the continent. Chad had explored security partnerships with Russia, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates, but those efforts delivered limited results, paving the way for renewed cooperation with France. Under the new arrangement, all activities will operate with the approval of the Chadian government, reflecting on N'Djamena's push for greater sovereignty over its security partnerships. Now, for France, the renewed relationship helps preserve its strategic presence in Central Africa, while for Chad, it provides critical support in tackling armed groups in the Lake Chad Basin and along its border with Sudan. Let's bring in Director Suvira Africa, Charles Nyakombo. Good to have you join us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Charles, so of course, I know that you have been following this development, and I wanted to ask you what you make of the diplomatic reset and the security realignment between France and Chad.
I think Chad should be celebrated for taking a bold move to relook into the security controls in the country, because the major role of a government is to protect their own citizens. So, Chad is surrounded by, a lot of security threats, whether you look at Sudan side, the war in Sudan infiltrating back to Chad is very possible. Looking at, the Lake Chad Basin side, where we have security threats, that really also threatens the security and stability of Chad itself. Of course, with the Boko Haram, also, the cases of Niger and of course Libya at the top. So Chad is strategically in a very dangerous position in terms of security-wise. But why I'm saying that Chad should be at least celebrated for this is that they are redefining relationship. So it is not like the old model where the France was, had a lot of say on what is happening, but now we are coming under our own terms, and that is something that if you ask me, I will say that will be leading now to France also the rethinking of the approach to Africa, not looking at Africa like just a country to a continent to be bulldozed around. So I believe this should be the interest of the Chadian government, and of course the Chad, the Chad as a country on its own, unless the other arrangements, after the agreements will be overlooked.
A defense analyst described it as a cautious attempt to return through France to return through the side door, with fewer soldiers, less visibility, and a more dependence on Chadian political concerns. Do you agree with that?
I definitely agree. Chad must trade also with a lot of caution, because this is a country that has had dominance for over 65 years. And of course, just less than 2 years ago, I can say they were, the relationship was severed. So when they're coming in with a new arrangement, of course, the first question we should be asking ourselves is that, why are they accepting this? Why would they really accept this? Is there something that Chad or the West African countries need to look into? But again, on the other flip side, if you send me out of your country and now you are inviting me on your own terms, and still you agree to come, that means that it's a signal that France also has a lot to benefit from having their presence in the West African countries, or just in West Africa. And I think France is looking at it from, I can say, strategic adaptation point of view, because if let's say there is a feeling that they're turning back to the old model, then I still believe the current president, the way he did, he can still save the relationship again. So it's both caution, both on the Chad government side or the Chad side, then also France side. And I hope that in this new arrangement, Chad will still have a full say, and if they feel like the relationship is not mutually beneficial, they should be ready to also, cut the ties again. Of course, on the other side of Chad, you've also seen they have tried to look for relationship from, the UAE. They have tried to look through the Turkey and Russia, but we agree that security issues sometimes are not just ideologically, should be viewed from the lens of ideology. We're also looking at the capability point of view. And now that France has historical knowledge of course, operating and working with the Chad military, and of course, also the intelligence of France in terms of military has been celebrated, for a while. I think it's also in the best interest of the Chad government to really, reinvite them. But of course, on this, I can say, new arrangement, which should be 100% beneficial to the Chad people.
Was this also a very skillful attempt by Chad to redefine this relationship and now make it a partnership of equals?
Yes. It's I can say it's a good and a positive gesture on how African countries should actually relate to the former colonizers. You are coming in not as a bully or someone who, or an equal partner, that you're coming in as kind of a relationship that should benefit both of us. Of course, I'm not proud to say that, Chad could not look within Africa to get support, of course, that should be the case. But it also shows that African Union or Africa should also redefine the principles that govern external military, so that any arrangement that any African country is getting into with an external military partner should be something that is beneficial to the Africans themselves. If Africa or African Union had capacity to, maintain peace and stability in Africa, I don't think Chad would have looked west or east. They would have redefined and looked at a way in which African can protect themselves. But now, if you look at African continent, it is in chaos. Whether you look at Somalia, whether you look at DRC Congo, whether you look at it from Ethiopia, it is just in chaos. And of course, internally, even Africans now are fighting against fellow Africans. Look at South Africa and all that. So security of the citizens matter, and intelligence of the entire, and having the knowledge of the operation of the country really indeed. If you ask me whether we are getting help from east or west, what is important is the life of our people and security of the nation.
Charles, let me just comment, because I was going to ask you if you think that the other Sahel states, that's Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, would follow suit and perhaps also redefine their relations with France. But just because you mentioned Africa and its defense strategy and defense spending, I mean, it also, I want to sort of pivot to that. If it's time we start to invest in our own defense, when you look at, also consider what's happening between Europe and America, if it's time we start investing in our own defense and stop looking to the West or the East.
Absolutely, we need to work on our own defense. It is quite, I can say, sad that Chad is still going to be, trained by France. It's funny. So why can't Africa just look for a way in which they can train their own military personnel? Because I'll train you based on how I fight my war. So that means that you do not have any other skill to defend yourself other than the ones that you've been given. It's like I'm giving you the new language to speak, so you can't really speak to any other person. So it's high time. But of course, if you look at the African countries themselves, even the battle they're currently fighting, internal battles first. If you look at what's happening in the DRC, if you look at what's happening in Ethiopia and all that, even fighting their own battles alone is a challenge. The West African countries, of course, threats from everywhere. So we have the external threats that now needs a lot of military intelligence and training. Then, of course, we also have the internal threats. So it is high time, I agree with you, that even the budgets for military should be increased. But the question is, who is going to train them? which African country or which African troop is really capable of offering such a training. So it's a big deficit, and I'm not so sure if this is something that African Union is really keen on or looking into.
I mean, so many defense partnerships and cooperation across the continent, it perhaps just leaves the continent vulnerable, because it almost feels like we do not have our own intelligence that is kept private, without the West or the East knowing exactly what we're doing. But we're following up with that development. Thank you so much for your time. Director Severa Africa, Charles Iyakombo, joining us from Kenya.
Thank you for having me.
Right, that's